Hey, this is Ramon, Channels Alpha 4, and this is my Bible study series, and we are on Genesis chapter 27, Jacob's deception. So here's the recap. Jacob deceives his father Isaac. Then Isaac blesses Jacob. Then Esau's, lost blessing is described. Then Jacob leaves, and when Esau returns, he then begs his father Isaac for any blessing. Heartbroken, Isaac gives a secondary anti-blessing, promising freedom from Jacob. Then Jacob runs for his life, and Esau's fury is described or hinted at. All right, now for the notes. So this chapter is a literary narrative in the trickster motif. It builds on what was set up in chapter 25, verses 28 through 34. There is wordplay, broad humor, and dramatic irony throughout this chapter. Yet, in the telling, it ends in a state of deep pathos, without a sense of catharsis, as ethos is violated, seemingly without consequence, especially if all you do is give this chapter a shallow read. And if you only stop at this chapter, one might find that this chapter is both deeply affecting and yet massively unsatisfying. The core conceit or assumption in this chapter is that a deathbed blessing and curse were thought by ancient people to be powerful, and that once they were given, it could not be rescinded. Here we also get the first hint of what might be a reference to the soul, when inferred in the concept of life force, nefesh in Hebrew. As Isaac feels weak and must be renourished or renewed before he can pass on his blessing. This blessing that he will bestow was originally Abraham's, given to him by God. The human senses are highlighted here: sight, touch, taste, smell, hearing, and even the mind. And yet, even reason here seems to fail. Every sense seems to fail when ignored. All the senses fail man. And only sound gives away the truth, but the truth is ignored. Yet in this lays a metaphor, that if something sounds wrong, don't believe it. In other words, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So, there you go. So that lesson is in here. So if your senses are telling you something is wrong, trust yourself and listen to your senses. Jacob then lies directly to his father, and Esau then loses his blessing. In some commentaries, they say that this happens for the third time. And depending on the commentary, they say that he either lost it at birth or at the oracle. Then he sold his birthright to Jacob by disregard, and now he loses it by blatant trickery. So those are the three times, depending on the commentary, that he lost his blessing. Part of what's so horrible about it, it's the level of the deception. It's not just a simple lie. He uses skins, animal skins, so he's involving nature in his deception. He has food that's prepared by another. He's using someone else's work to help with this deception. In this case, his mother. He is using someone else's clothes. He's stealing someone's clothes. He's using alcohol, so that way his father will fall for the deception and be more pliable to the deception. And then he just lies directly to deceive his father. So this deception is deep. It's not a one-level deception. He's going as low as he can go to still get what he wants. So I mean, it's a very bad low point in the moral character of Jacob. When Isaac learns that Jacob lied to him, Isaac is heartbroken and confused over the deceit. The mother plays a stronger role in this chapter than in any other point in the story, than any other point in the Bible so far. In this chapter itself, she is also the most important human character. Yet, for all of that, she is presented here as morally offensive. For the sons and for the ancient people who heard this story, the blessing was about securing eternal inheritance. This particular interpretation of the blessing, the one that was lost by Esau and stolen by Jacob, was that of fertility and dominion. The metaphors that are represented here would be those of rain, grain, wine, and olive oil. These are the regular harvest seasons, or the yearly cycle, as seen before the modern notions of time and calendar. They also have other meanings, such as representing agriculture, respect, success, leadership, command, and a disincentive from being cursed, as well as an incentive for others to bless you, or to bless him that receiveth the blessing. So, it's giving you power over time, over nature, over the seasons. The blessing isn't just about being the head of the family or getting double the inheritance. It's about giving you power over nature, over time itself. So it's a very powerful blessing, giving you power over food and over the things that you need to eat. And on food, the reason why the meal that Abraham ate, which his son served him, was such a big deal, was that it made the blessing a formal covenant. That's why at the end of all of these covenants, you see a big meal happen, a feast. So from here on out, this chapter becomes a study of a troubled family in crisis. Yet, the mother does play her role fully to one of her sons, while totally betraying her other child. Rebekah willingly takes on the blame for Jacob's actions. Yet, she does pay a price for this, one that is easily missed. For as you read on, you will find that Jacob never sees his mother alive again after this episode. Now, it's not made explicit, but in reading, you'll see that they never interact again in the Bible. Some Jewish commentators and rabbis see Rome and Christendom in the character of Esau. Also, we get to, as they're kind of bad-mouthing Esau, he marries some Hittite women. And the point of this is that foreign intermarriage was seen as lowly at that point in time in history. And what that point is either when it was written or when it was supposed to have taken place. And the prophet Jeremiah also has an interpretation on this. And his interpretation is in the Bible, so for that matter, the Bible has an interpretation on this. Jeremiah sees Jacob's deceit of his father and Rebekah's treatment of Esau as a cause for God's judgment. For Jeremiah, it is an example of the chosen people at their worst. Yet Esau will not be denied. He begs or prays for his fair share, to which Isaac gives his favorite son a secondary blessing. One that is sad and twisted, yet with a promise of hope, that one day he would have freedom from Jacob and freedom from Jacob's blessing, as he would break the yoke. Yet Esau's freedom, or revenge, depending on how you want to read it, comes not in his lifetime, but it comes to his descendants in the 9th and 8th century BC, which can be read about in 1 Kings chapter 11, 2 Kings chapter 8, and 2 Chronicles chapter 28. Esau's rage recalls the story of Cain and Abel, if only indirectly, while Rebekah's intervention foreshadows a tragic event in the story of David, as can be read about in 2 Samuel chapter 14, verses 1 through 24. And again, though it may seem so, Rebekah does not get off scot-free. She loses both her sons as a punishment for her schemes, and that is the only thing that she doesn't want to happen. She specifically says in the text, I do not want to lose both my children in one day. But in effect, she does. Though not literally, because they're both still alive. Jacob leaves to Haran, where where his uncle Laban lives, to find a wife and to avoid his brother's wrath, while Esau resents his mother. And though he loves and honors his father, he leaves to become a great leader of one of Abraham's rejected lines, even marrying one of Ishmael's daughters. So the rejected family of Abraham becomes his family because he was rejected. And he marries one of Ishmael's daughters, as well as some other wives. So from here, we then get a pretext of prejudice against the Hittites. And this kind of puts a dark shadow over the ending verse of this story in this chapter. This chapter does not have a happy ending. So now we're going to get on to the questions. In your opinion, what should Esau have done throughout this chapter? Do you think he could have done things differently? He was outsmarted. He was off doing what he was told. He was following the rules. And yet he had his blessing stolen from him, even though he was trying to honor his father. And Jacob was not honoring his father, and yet he got the blessing. What would you have done if you were Esau? If you were in his situation, how would you have responded? The question of what Esau should have done, I don't know, because like I said, he was gone. He was honoring his father. But as for what I would have done, my first reaction when reading the story this last time around was he should have taken his revenge right there and then. But obviously that's not what happens. And considering that Jacob's the good guy, it's not what we want to happen, right? So, and even Jeremiah later on, when he reads back on this story, will see the darkness and the evil and the sin in Jacob's heart, and even in Rebekah's. So if that jealousy and pettiness and ambition can corrupt even the great patriarchs and matriarchs, then what hope do we have, you know? But then I also think about the fact that you want the Hebrewic people to survive. You want Jesus to be born. So if you want that, you got to have Jacob. So what do? You know what I mean? Like it's a very complicated question. So what would I have done if I was Esau? I would have raged. I would have definitely gone after the brother. But luckily Esau doesn't. In fact, Esau is very much the better man. He could have gotten revenge. He doesn't. He could have killed him immediately. He doesn't. Esau, to me, is the hero of this story. Just point blank. He is the good guy of the story. He is the hero. He does the right thing throughout this chapter, no matter how anyone else wants to look at him. All right. So how should we respond to injustice? Obviously, Esau got angry, but he didn't kill his brother, and he didn't kill his mother. He did run off, but he runs off to start off a great tribe who will later on, at least according to the story, will break free of the Israelites. So, there's that. And then the next question is, how can difficult or even dishonorable people be a blessing in our own lives? So think of a time that somebody who treated you horrible or someone that did horrible things actually was a benefit to you. Think about that, like how the long term might have worked out better by having a really bad person in your life, or was it better to get away from them? Or did your character grow by having this person in your life? I don't know. How can difficult or even dishonorable people be a blessing in our own lives? And then, have you ever been Jacob? Have you ever been Rebekah? Have you ever acted in the way that they do in this story? Like, when I was reading it this time around, I saw myself in Esau, but I could very easily be Jacob. I could very easily be Rebekah. I could be doing the wrong thing or encouraging someone else to do the wrong thing. So there's that to think about as well. And then, have you ever gotten a reward or a gift that you didn't deserve? And how do you feel about that now? Now for the extra. This story truly upset me. I found myself searching the Talmud for answers and for the fate of Esau. I even looked up real history to see if his people, his supposed descendants, were real, if they survived, if they truly did get free from Jacob's yoke. Honestly, I didn't find those answers. To put it plainly, Jacob did not deserve the blessing or the grace that he received. Yet, he received them anyway. However, throughout the next few chapters, we will see that God brings Jacob to a state of grace worthy of the status that he stole. God humbles Jacob. He even injures him directly. He teaches him lessons about what it means to keep your word even when you don't want to. God makes Jacob work for all that he received unethically. God brings Jacob to a state in life where he is able to appreciate the severity of what he had done and makes him able to understand the responsibility that was bestowed upon him. For me, as a Catholic, in the Catholic way of mind, it is about forgiveness. This chapter and the lesson here and the lesson going forward in the next few chapters with Esau and Jacob's later interactions, it is about forgiveness, not about revenge, and it's not even about justice. Grace is a gift, not something that is earned. That is the lesson in this chapter. And personally, I have made enough mistakes to realize that this is something to be grateful for. When I was younger, I identified with Jacob. In college, none of these characters resonated with me. But this time around, I sympathized with Esau. And in reading his story, it was painful. All right, so that's it. I'm going to try to edit this. And peace, like, subscribe. See you in the next video.